would happen? Ammon would strike him dead, that's what would happen. The high priest spoke again, more urgently, asking if it would please the great God to come to his divine Father now. For the first time, here in this holy city, Taharka disobeyed the command of a priest. Slowly, languidly, he tilted his head back, half closing his eyes. It does not please me. I will rest now. And after all, as Shabbataka would have said, what could they do about it? The great God had spoken. In a silence shimmering with an undercurrent of shock, they carried him from the offering chamber and from the ancient court, through other gates and passages into the great house of the king. Taharka felt the numbness leave him. This was more like what he was used to. No giant chambers and pillars here. The rooms were no larger than his rooms in Napata. The cedar wood stools and tables no finer. Even the great bed in the alcove had little more gold and silver on it than his great bed at home. He stretched himself on that great bed now. Silent servants drew red linen curtains across long, narrow windows and crept from the room. Never had Taharka felt so alone. Tears gathered beneath his eyelids. He realized there was no one here he knew. Shabbataka and the priest of Sebek had chosen the attendants who would accompany him, some for their strength, some for their intelligence, some because they had traveled north before. Now Taharka realized that he barely recognized any of them. Anyway, he thought, what did it all matter? The day would come, it must come, when he would enter the Holy of Holies, lay his hands on the sacred image, and place it in the sacred cask, to be carried in procession. And when that day came, who could save him then? There was a little flurry at the door of the outer chamber, a whispering and, unbelievably, a kind of giggle. He sat up, amazed, pushing aside the curtains of the sleeping alcove. Hurry! It was not a little round girl who stood near the door. It was a tall, imposing young woman with innumerable black braids hanging over her shoulders, the tips tinted with gold. She wore a collar of gold around her neck, but it was not a statue, not a goddess. It was Shepnu. The first thing she said to him was, "Are you hungry?" That ends chapter 4. Before we move on to chapter 5, I wanted to point out some alliteration. Let's see if I can find it real quickly before we move past. I see. It's when he first starts traveling north to the capital city, and he encounters some waters. Here we go. 4 times in those 30 days the current quickened, and the barge was drawn up on land to be dragged by teams of men past the wild white waters churning over the rocks. Here, wild white waters. Thought you guys would enjoy catching that and paying attention to that, since we just were speaking about that in class. It's just so lovely to read, and it really draws you into the story a little more, and it's as pleasant to say as it is to imagine, so you should say it. It feels good in your mouth. We'll pick up with chapter 5 next time. See ya.